My name is Caitlin Snyder. I am our outreach coordinator here at MLJ Adoptions. It's the great pleasure that I have to speak with families at the beginning of their adoption process. I'm able to answer any questions they may have about the process, about the programs that we have here at MLJ, and what their adoption could look like. Like I said, it's my favorite part of my job to do this. Can meet with families both in person and speak over the phone, and help you even wrestle through which country is the best for you. And so next we're going to have Nicole Skellinger. She's our adoption attorney here, and then she's also our director at MLJ.
All right, so from there we're going to talk about the outline of the international adoption process. And please don't feel at all that you need to memorize this, not at all. You're going to have guidebooks along the way, samples and instructions that I'll tell you all about how to do this, and your program director is also going to walk alongside you on this journey. My goal is just to give you an overarching, this is what the process is going to look like in general. Okay, so how does it start? First, it's going to be submitting your application, and that's going to be pretty much the same in most adoption agencies. You're going to have a few-page application where you fill out information like your name, contact information, your marital status, how long you've been married, some financial information, and criminal history. The idea there is for us to be able to do a pre-screening to make sure that you meet the eligibility requirements for the country that you're looking to adopt from, and then also for the federal government. So the federal government does require that you meet a certain income guideline, and that's what we're pre-screening you for, even though we don't have all the background financial documents. So it's just a pre-screening. You need to make sure that you meet 125% of the poverty line. That's the idea with that. And so we're reviewing it to make sure you meet all of those initial criteria before we can go ahead and approve you to move forward and become a client family. And that will usually take about 3 business days, sometimes less, because we're very excited to approve applications when they come in. We want to help you along this journey as best we can. And so we'll go ahead and send you an email of approval with then the next steps of what you'll need to do, which will be then becoming a client family. And that is going to be when you're selecting a country program as well at this time. So in order to become a client family, you're going to go ahead and submit your adoption service agreement, and that's our contract, assigned fee schedule, and your initial payment. The adoption service agreement, though, is a very important document, and I would encourage you to read it before you're ready to just sign it and move forward. It explains a lot of the international adoption process, what our responsibilities are as your agency, and what your responsibilities are as well, because we do have mutual obligations. And also it goes into pretty great detail about the risks involved in international adoption for you to really kind of ponder what those are, making sure that international adoption is the right fit for your family before moving forward. And if you have questions at all about the contract, let me know. I wrote the contract, so I sure well better be able to answer those questions for you. And so you can call me and I'll go ahead and do that. Sometimes we have even contract consultations when our families really thoroughly go through the contract and have tabs. Did I mention it's 30 pages? It's a long contract. And so they'll come in with tabs with questions, and we'll go ahead and discuss what those questions are. And I love when that happens because families are really pondering the issues and what they're agreeing to. And I'm more than happy to talk to families about that before moving forward. It's a big commitment. It's a big decision financially, emotionally, and every other way something could be a big decision international adoption is. And so right when you're getting started, we want to be able to answer any questions that you have before moving forward. From that point, you'll go ahead and get your client care information and get started on the first step of the international adoption process, which is your home study. That's also for domestic would be the home study would be your first step. So we have a great Department of Social Services here, and if you're in Indiana, we're able to go ahead and do that home study for you. We can do the visit and all of that because it's state specific. If you're not located in Indiana, you would have another agency that would be doing your home visit and your home study for you. We're very much accustomed to working with other agencies. In fact, about 70% of our families live outside of the state of Indiana. So we're very accustomed to that. We work with other agencies all the time, not a problem. Though it is a benefit if you are in Indiana that you're working with one agency throughout the duration, I would say. But we'll go ahead and get started with the first step. So it's a 3-step process. First is gathering documents for your home study. Next is the home visit. And then third is writing the actual home study. So the first thing is gathering documents. This is part of where all that paperwork comes into play, really. Lots and lots of document gathering. So background checks, child protective services checks, reference letters from families. You have to get a physical. Lots and lots of information to be able to submit to your home study agency for them to approve it. So that's going to go ahead and be submitted to the home study agency, so then they can move on to step 2. They'll go ahead and let you know if there's anything else that's needed, or just we're ready to go ahead and move forward. And so next step is going to be the actual home visit. And this is what families mostly associate with the home study. Is there going to be somebody coming to my home with white gloves, looking through my drawers, and that sort of thing? And that is, of course, it's an anxiety-ridden experience, but that is not the goal. The goal is not to find things wrong with your home, not to find things wrong with you. The goal is a partnership. The social worker coming to your home, how can we partner? How can we walk alongside you to help you be the best parent that you can be for these kids when they come home? That is our ultimate goal. So they're going to be asking you questions. They do a short home tour, but really that's not what the home visit's about. It's really more about you. Adoption is permanent. Let's talk about that. Are you really prepared? Are you sure? What are you looking for as far as characteristics in a child? Because the home study approves you to adopt based on this date, but it also approves the type of child that you can adopt. So that means age, gender, country, and additional needs. Just a side note here. So with special needs, it's a really good idea to get on the same page as your partner about what you're open to as far as age, characteristics, special needs, before a social worker is asking you the questions in your home. It's key. So we'll help you with that. We'll give you a sheet that explains all those additional needs so you can have that conversation first. And then they'll go ahead and talk to you about that because the home study is going to be very detailed in explaining the type of characteristics that you're open to. And when we say special needs in international adoption, that may conjure up really severe needs in your mind. But that's not always what we're talking about. On our special needs list, there's things like a lazy eye, vision that's correctable with glasses, there's missing toes, things like that that would be considered more minor correctable, but they are things that would be considered extra needs for a child. So those are things to consider. I think in considering extra needs in a child, though, it's really important to consult an international doctor about that, about what that could look like. I think it's important to consider all the additional needs that there could be and to be as open as you feel comfortable being without crossing that line, though. It's so important that you know yourself well enough to know that not to go beyond a certain point. If a child's needs are too severe, that's not good for that child, and that's not good for your family. And that's okay to know that, and it's good to know that, to know where those limits are for you, at the same time being as open as you feel comfortable being. So you'll go ahead and have that conversation about the home study while they're in your home, while the social worker is your home, before they'll go ahead and write the actual home study document, which is your home study assessment, which is a 12 to 15 page document that will go into great detail about your life, about your support system, about your background, about your finances, in order to then start your immigration process. So the home study really is your first approval in the long series of approvals that is international adoption. So your home study is your state approval. With us, it would be us approving you as a state licensed agency in order to adopt based on the laws of our state. Step 2 of the approval is going to be approval through the federal government, so through the immigration, USCIS, United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. That's the next step. So you got your state approval, now we're working on the federal. The federal is going to be, you're going to fill out a form with your program director and submit some additional documentation for the federal government then to issue you an approval. So that's what's called an I-600A or an I-800A form. You're going to have an alphabet soup of all these immigration forms, so you don't need to worry about that now. But that is the application for the advanced processing of an orphan petition, so that the U.S. government can make sure that you're approved by the state and that you meet the federal income guidelines, okay? And so that usually takes about 6 to 8 weeks to get an approval there. But during that 6 to 8 weeks, it is not time to relax. There's more things to do, more paperwork to complete. So during that time, you're going to also start on your dossier, which you may or may not have heard horror stories about. So the dossier is the application to the foreign government. So you've done your home study application to the state, your I-600A, your I-800A application to the federal government. Now your dossier is the application to the country. And so lots of paperwork that will help you. That can be daunting at first, but your program director really will walk alongside you on this part of the process to gather documents that were similar to the home study in some ways. More background checks, the physical, things like that. And then it's going to get translated, authenticated, all sorts of fancy seals before it gets submitted to the country so that they can review your file. Now the whole length of process very much depends on the family, how long it takes them to get documents together, if they need to get physical appointments and things like that. In general, we're talking about between 5 to 9 months for this whole process before the dossier gets submitted to the country. But then that's a really great day when the dossier does get submitted to the country. We have staff in the country, in each of our countries that we have really long-standing relationships with. It gets submitted to them for them to submit it to the central authority or similar entity in the country. And so they'll go ahead and submit it. And you may have heard of international adoption as a hurry up and wait process. I don't know if anybody's heard of that before. So we just talked about the hurry up. Now we're talking about the wait. And so this is probably the most difficult part in the international adoption process, and Lydia might speak to this, but it really is where your dossier, your file is just sitting with an entity where they have a long list of families that may be waiting, and you're waiting for a child to become in need of a family that meets your characteristics. So they'll have a list of dossiers based on the length of time that you submitted your dossier. Then they'll get information about a child. In general, they're going down the list to the longest waiting family who's open to the characteristics of that child. So the length of time to be matched to the child is very variable, right? It depends on the types of kids that are in need of a family at any given time. It depends on the other families and what they're open to at any given time, and it depends on what you're open to at any given time. So we can always provide ranges to give you an idea, but we can never predict and know what will really happen in your adoption process because they're all different. But from that point, you will get a match or a referral with a child, and this is a great day for sure. So you'll have the child's information that will be shared from the foreign government to our staff in the country to our staff here who will share it with you. I know that's probably one of Lydia's favorite parts of her job, that she gets to call you, and I know she'll call you in the evenings or whenever she gets the information to share as much as she can about these kids so that she can then send you the information, so the social history, the medical history, and all of that of the child, so you can go ahead, and photos as well, full-length photos as well of the kids, so you can go ahead and review that to determine if you want to move forward at all. And so you can take that to an international adoption doctor, which is really, really highly, highly encouraged, especially if you're open to some additional needs. It's really, really important that you do that. And families also often ask, can we decline a referral? Well, the answer to that is yes. But it does need to be for a medical reason in general. So that's why we do it to take to a doctor. So if the child really was outside of the characteristics of what you were looking for, and the doctor's, this looks a little bit more severe than what I think you might be open to, we get a letter from the doctor, submit that to the country, and then continue to move forward and get another match of the child. But when you are ready to move forward with one of those kids, for Bulgaria anyways, and for a lot of the countries, you travel to the country, and so Lydia will speak to that some, and that's a great time to be able to go and visit and see the child. For Bulgaria, you're going for about a week and a half to spend some time visiting the child where they are in an orphanage or in a foster home. But then you have to leave, which may be, for some families, the most difficult part of this process. It really is, because you would have spent a good bit of time with the child, bonding with them, loving on them, and then having to leave knowing that your child is being parented halfway around the world. And that is really hard, and that's where you need to enlist that support that you've been developing from day one to try and enlist their help and help you get this through these several months before the child comes home. And what's happening during these several months is the legal process of adoption. So in all of our country programs, we have what we call foreign supervised providers or foreign providers, and mostly they're attorney-led. And for Bulgaria, we work with an organization called Vesta that is also attorney-led, and they're going to be processing the legal part of the adoption for you. Okay, so you're going to be getting your adoption decree, if there's an act of adoption, anything else associated with that legal process of adoption. And then you're also going to be filing for your second part of the immigration process. So the first part of the immigration process, remember we did the home study, that's approval by the state. We did the I-600A, I-800A, that's approval by the federal government. We did the dossier, that's approval by the foreign country. Now we're going back through the federal government to get an approval for the child. So your first approval from the federal government was just for you, based on your characteristics. And the next one is based on the child. Does the child meet the legal definition of orphan or legal definition of convention adoptee? And those are very nuanced definitions, and they're going to be reviewing the child's case file to make sure that the child meets those requirements so that they can get a visa. And this visa for orphans or for convention adoptees is a very, very special visa because it's for an immediate relative. And that immediate relative designation is so important in immigration because it allows the child to skip the line, which is what you want. You don't want the child to wait any longer than is absolutely necessary. So they skip the line for visas over fiancé visas, employment visas, and all the others to be able to come home to you. And so when you're at that point to get the visa, you're traveling to the country again, and this time though, you're the child's legal parents, which is a little bit different, right? And so they're with you the whole time, which can be quite an adjustment. So for Bulgaria specifically, if you're adopting from Bulgaria, the first trip is when you can see Bulgaria. The second trip, you're not seeing anything but hanging out with this kid. That is your goal and that is your focus. And so if you need to get knickknacks or things from the country, the first trip is the one to do that. And so you're in the country and going to the appointments that you need to go to. Our team in the country is helping you with that in order to then travel home. In all of our country programs, there are going to be some requirements after you come home as far as post-adoption. If it's post-adoption reporting, usually they're agency reports where a social worker comes to your home. And I can tell you that for the most part, people don't want to do this part. You're home, your family is complete, you've been poked and prodded to the nth degree, you've shared so much personal information that we now have about you, you're done with it. But it is so important to comply with what's required by the country. I cannot emphasize this enough. That's the only way when our countries get reports that they know the kids are doing okay. It's the only way. And they care about these kids. They want to know that they're doing good. And they want to know that what they're doing in international adoption is a good thing in order for it to continue. Countries have closed their doors to international adoption for families deciding that they didn't want to submit those reports. So it's that important. But that's really the overview, and there's lots more details involved in that, but as you go through the process, you'll get a feel for it.